What's up, friends? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Be Less Unfit Performance podcast YouTube show. You're going to notice over the course of these videos that I've changed a lot. I filmed these over the course of 2 years. So as my life changed, you see my body change. One. Two, I changed the way I was going to use these videos. They were going to only be an add-on to the program. Instead, I wanted everybody to be able to have this great information, and so now they're live. If you have any questions or want to know more about the Be Less Unfit program, please head over to sampogue.com or belessunfit.com to learn more and check it out. In the meantime, please enjoy this amazing show and learn more about our guests by going down to the comment section bio area and click what they have going on. I'm so blessed that they said yes to helping me out, and I want you to go learn from them as well. So enjoy the show, have a great day, and please remember to subscribe. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BLF Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pogue. I'm sitting down here with my friend Dave Dellanave, the owner and founder of the Movement Minneapolis, the hobbyist aficionado who's into everything from skydiving, shooting guns, olive oil, motorcycle riding, but someone as I've grown a friendship with over the years, someone I really look up to in the way he runs his life, in the way he still uses fitness as a means to an end, but he uses fitness as a way to fulfill himself in the other activities that he does. And something that I've been on a big personal development journey myself on is finding new hobbies for myself to spend my time in. That's not just work and not just fitness, because it is very fulfilling and it does have a lot to do with your internal happiness, which in turn has a lot to do with the way your body looks, the way it feels, and the way you portray it to everybody else. So without further ado, really pumped to have Dave on and to talk all things hobbies. First things, thanks for having us, but tell everybody a little bit about where you are and where this love of hobbies and just doing shit came from.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Would you like to write a dating profile for me?
Absolutely, I got you.
That intro is perfect. Like, I dig that. Yeah, so I think my I don't know. I don't really know where it came from. Like, I kind of have some theories of why I have so many varied interests. I think it was a confluence of interesting factors. One was like my dad was always really into like taking things apart, and he was very like forward thinking. My dad, like I was born in Italy. My dad's Italian. He was one of the first people in Italy who was converting cars from gas or diesel to LP gas, which at the time was very inexpensive, and it's actually still very inexpensive. It's not super common, but like within, it's almost like the Tesla network where like you can get pretty much anywhere you need to go as long as you make sure there's a station. Like you can drive an LP gas car in Italy, no problem. And it is cheaper than gasoline or diesel, I think. So he was always like really forward thinking and stuff like that. And then when I was in like middle school, actually even literally going back into elementary school, elementary, middle, and high school, I was super early in tech. So I knew how to like sysadmin and like Unix machines, all like build websites and do all that kind of stuff, like really, really early on. So I was making like pretty crazy money as a like elementary school and middle school kid. Like I'm talking $20 an hour back in the 90s.
Damn.
With no overhead because I was a child, right? So I'm making like pretty good money, and like I had nothing to spend it on other than things I was interested in. So I was constant, and like my parents wouldn't let me buy video games. They wouldn't let me, even when I was 16, they wouldn't let me buy my own car. They were like, no, you can just use our car. You don't need your own car. So that's like the typical thing that a kid saves up for, right? Yeah. And I didn't need to do that. So I had all this disposable income to like pursue interests and hobbies. And, you know, I get into something and I'll like spend a bunch of money on like parts and tools and stuff to do it. And then I might never do it again. And now I've got $1,000 worth of tools sunk into this, you know, thing. But I think that's kind of what started it, is like the interest and curiosity, but then also the ability to pursue it because I had all this disposable income burning a hole in my pocket that I had earned, but I just didn't have anything. I didn't have rent. I didn't have bills. I didn't have anything to spend it on other than dumb shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that kind of is where it started. And what that's led to as an adult is, you know, I'll be like, I want to restore a motorcycle, and I'll just do it. You know, like I'll go buy a beat up, clapped out scooter. I actually have a love for doing scooters. Because, and actually I recommend this to people a lot if they're kind of curious about like motorcycles and restoring stuff. Do a scooter because they're super cheap, they're super easy to work on, the parts are plentiful. If you screw it up, like worst case scenario, you throw the thing away and you get another one because they're that cheap. And they're super fun. Once you get it done, like you've got this fun scooter that you can tool around on. So I think that's kind of the origin story of my interests. And how widely varied they are.
Do you ever feel like, as I've gotten older and I've talked to more people, a telephobia, or people who are fearful of failing, is very real. And hobbies is no different than any other professional venture. Didn't you ever fear of just like sucking at fixing motorcycles or not being good at it or worrying about not liking it? You're just willing to jump in 2 feet and not care?
Yeah, man. I don't want to say this to sound like at all arrogant or like, look at me, I'm so incredible, but I just don't even have that sensation or feeling of like, man, like I really am afraid to do this because I might not be good at it. And I don't know if that is because I have so much of a background and I've learned so much about like motor learning and like how we learn. Like you literally can't be good at something the first time you do it. You might be okay at it. You might get lucky, but like it is not possible for you to, and actually it's interesting as if we're talking like about coaching, we have a lot of dumb sayings in coaching. Like you don't want to learn bad habits to start. You want to start with good habits. Well, if you could start with all the good habits, that would imply that you already know how to do it, right? Like, no, you have to learn it poorly. You execute the movement poorly with probably bad habits. And then with good coaching and time and practice and repetition, you clean it up, you pull those bad habits out and you instill the best possible movement pattern. So I don't know, man, I don't have that. I just don't have that fear of failure. I mean, that's not to say that I think I'm going to crush every single thing I set out to do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop me from pursuing something that I'm interested in. I'm not like, oh, this has to be the first time I do it. It's going to be sloppy. And one of the things I've learned from making, and when I say making, I mean like welding and fabrication, or I've made some jewelry with like gold and palladium, or woodworking. The kind of like hard skills of turning sort of raw materials into something usable is like, even people who are really good still make mistakes. You just probably don't notice them. And when you notice them in the thing that you're doing, eventually you forget. You're like, yeah, I know that on the backside of that piece of furniture, there's a weld that isn't as clean as the other welds, but you forget about it and no one else will ever notice. It's like, it doesn't matter. If it's going to fall apart, sure, that's a problem. But if it's not like perfect, nothing ever is. Nothing made by hand is ever perfect. And that's actually what makes, handmade stuff interesting. It gives it character and personality because an actual human being had to do it. Like when I started woodworking and making like furniture type things, and I don't even want to say furniture because I haven't really made like, I don't know, like let's say like a chair or something. It is remarkably hard to get things symmetrical. So when you see a chair that has like rounded handles, or like those like chairs, like kind of mid-century modern style stuff where all the joints are rounded, that stuff is so incredibly hard to do. And I have so much respect for the people who do it because it's a material where once you take too much away, you can't put it back.
Yeah.
Like metal is kind of cool because if you take too much away, you can just put it back. You just weld in filler and then grind it down. But with wood, once it's gone, it's gone. So getting something perfectly smooth and symmetrical, it's so hard. And there's a magic in doing that. And that's why custom made furniture like is beautiful and expensive, because it should be.
Yeah. As I'm sitting here listening to you, maybe the better classification for you is just the craftsman. Someone who's just, because here's the thing with you, and this is what I really probably attach to the most about watching you from afar, is that it's not one hobby. Because one thing that I go through is like, I watch my buddy Bryce, who loves fly fishing, and he wakes up and thinks about fishing. His job is salmon habitat restoration for his occupation. Like, that's all he does is think about how the riverbeds affect the salmon runs, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So everything he does is geared around like, oh, I think about fishing. Like we were driving down the road going 40 miles an hour and this dude's like, pull over. I saw a pool of fish in that river. And I'm like, Jesus, dude. Like he's just that good at it. But what I loved about you is because I don't have that one thing I really love. Like even for me, like I loved baseball and that was my thing. And now I get to hang out with pro baseball players and I still don't have that, like, I just love baseball. Like if I miss watching a game, I missed watching the game. Right. But I think for me, it's like I've always looked at like, I don't have that one thing I'm just passionate about that like I just have to do. But then I started watching you being like, this motherfucker does everything. Like one day you're building a table, the next minute you're making some olive oil, and then you're working on your skydiving, and then you're doing some movement. Like you're just creating. And I just love, and I think your appreciation is just for really attention to detail and fine craftsmanship. Like I don't care what you do, I just care that you care about doing it well, right? In any capacity.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, here's the thing. I'm never gonna be the best in the world at anything. At any one thing. Like I'm not, it's not going to happen because like you, I have a tremendous respect for the person who pursues that one thing to the ultimate perfection. Like that is just, they live and breathe, live, sleep, breathe that thing, whatever it is. Like I have a buddy on Instagram that I know kind of through the Softly crew who's just the consummate outdoorsman. I mean, he's hunting in the fall, he's hunting in the winter, he's hiking in the spring, he's scouting in the summer. I mean, there is not a day or a part of the year that he isn't thinking about hunting or doing something related to hunting in some capacity. It's amazing. I'm never going to be that guy because my version of that is actually the breadth and just doing a whole ton of things pretty well. I'm not going to be the best cook. I'm not going to be the best fabricator, anything, but I'll be good enough at it to like really enjoy doing it and be able to probably share it with other people, get a lot out of it for myself. Another thing that is interesting is I'll be good enough to be able to take something from that domain and apply it to a different domain. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really cool when you start doing. I think one thing you get from multiple hobbies is you see how things can connect to completely unrelated things. Like, I probably can't think of an example like right off the top of my head, but like I'll see something in metal fabrication that I can actually apply in the gym and coaching because it's a related concept. And that's incidentally where a lot of innovation comes from. It's when somebody moves from one industry to a completely different one, doesn't have the paradigms of the new industry instilled in them. And they're like, well, why do you do this way? Well, that's the way it's always been done. And then this outsider goes, yeah, but it would be way better if you did it this other way that is totally unrelated. And then boom, you've like completely shifted a paradigm in an industry. So I think that's another benefit. Like I totally respect the, the 10,000 hours, like person who's just crushing it at that one thing, but it's not going to be me. I like that breadth. Yeah. I think that's what I think that's what's unique. And I don't think any one of those things is better or worse. I think it just depends on the individual.
And I think that's what was so powerful to me to watch, right? Because, watching you go through this life transition that you're going through to then just watch how you decided to invest your time was something that I was really respecting of. Was like, holy shit, like this whole life thing just happened. And instead of like wallowing in like going and just crushing some whiskey, which is not necessarily a bad thing, was like, this dude's doing everything with this. Like, I'm a busy person. And I'm like, this guy's already up fabbing a table before I'm even up writing an article, right? And he just went to bed.
Oh, dude, I mean,
but like, that's what's cool about watching it is like, you just do so much shit. But one thing I talk about a lot is like, just getting started is so powerful.
Yeah.
Right? And you mentioned a thing where it's like, man, I just go all in. I buy $1,000 worth of parts and I just decide I'm going to do it. But you might wake up and like, I don't really like it. But I think there's something powerful in that. Like, just all of a sudden, like maybe you don't like metalworking, but you bought all the shit from metal fabbing, and all of a sudden maybe, oh, I have shit I can make stained glass windows with because I have a solder and I have a whatever. And you're like, oh, I really love that. Like, and that's an easy one. But like that thing led you to your thing. Right? Because that's no different than fitness, right? Like it's not someone hitting their big 500-pound deadlift for the first time. It's that the journey of who they became during the process of deadlifting that was the really powerful experience of fitness, right?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things there. Like one, it's really not celebrated to do lots of different things, right? Like the person who follows that one thing and gets to be the best at it is really what's celebrated. You know, it's like the hero dreams of sushi kind of idea, right? Like he's been doing nothing but making the best sushi his entire life. Super cool. I would fucking kill myself if I was hero.
I would too.
Right? So, but that's what's celebrated in our culture, is doing the same thing for a long time. It's not celebrated to change a lot. And then by that same token, what's really frowned upon is quitting.
Yeah.
Oh my God, don't ever quit anything, because if you quit, you failed. One of my favorite books I've ever read, I give this out to people all the time. I've probably bought 200 copies of it. Seth Godin's The Dip. I feel like probably you've read it.
I haven't, but I like Seth Godin quite a bit.
All right, so you should pick it up. It's like 9 pages, like typical Seth Godin.
Yeah.
You know? But the premise of The Dip is that to do any like big thing, you're gonna have like this moment of excitement, and then there's gonna be this massive dip that you have to just slog through, and then eventually you come out on top. And like, I think one of the examples in the book that is good and makes sense is like Yelp. Yelp had a massive dip to become what it is. They had to create an enormous index. They had to have a lot of reviews and a lot of users and a lot of places on it. But then once they did, well, now they're a 300 million or $1 billion or whatever company, right? But the other part of the dip, and the part that I think is the most important, is he talks about knowing when it's not worth going through that dip, when you should actually quit. And I think that is such an undervalued, underappreciated skill. Like, you can always quit. You can always decide like, yeah, I sunk a bunch of money and time into this, and I may or may not have gotten anything out of it, but it doesn't matter because it's not serving me anymore. It's like in poker, you don't throw good money after bad, right? Like you can't chase it if you have a shitty hand. And I think if more people were willing to accept from the very beginning that they would just quit and be okay with it when they didn't like it anymore, I think they might be more likely to start. I don't know. Maybe that's part of the fear of starting, is you feel like once you start, now you're like wedded to this thing for eternity and you're never going to be able to quit it. But I think if you start with the idea that like, hey, if it doesn't serve me, I'm just going to quit, I think maybe you'd be more likely to start. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think the other part too, and this is something where I really admire the way you do it, is where do I find time? Because now we're talking about installing something new into someone's life. And the time, we're in the day and age where we're in the battle for your bandwidth, right? Like Disney Plus just came out, Google or YouTube TV just came out, Amazon, everything. Everything is about your bandwidth and what you choose, because we have so much available information. Well, with that being said, the average person still comes home tired as shit from work. They aren't happy with the way their body looks and feels or performs. They have kids and family and life, and they have life shit. Right? Like, I'm able to be me because I'm a 33-year-old single dude. Like, it's pretty easy to do what I want all the time. Right? Like, I can admit that. But for like my cousin who's got 2 kids, like, how does he come home and install hobbies? And so what I want to know from you is, how do you manage your time? Because you do so many different things to where it's not even just a factor of like, oh, I make time for it. It's like, you kind of have to be organized with your time for how many different shit things you do.
No, the answer is I manage my time extraordinarily poorly. I mean, look, I recognize the exact same privilege, right? Like, single 36-year-old, live by myself. Like, I have enormous flexibility with my time. Part of it is choices, right? Like, I've made the choice over the years to start my own businesses rather than work for somebody. And that's a choice that comes with a lot of risk. It comes with a lot of downsides, and it comes with a lot of upsides as well. Like, it gives you a lot more freedom. I think, speaking specifically about jobs, like, Americans consistently work way, way, way too fucking hard for what they get. Like, Americans are working, I don't know the exact numbers, but something like twice what Europeans work, and getting like half of the total like net pay. Like, if you look at benefits and pay and all that stuff, like, people are literally working too hard. And I tell members at the gym this all the time. Like, I'm thinking of one guy in particular, he comes in like once there was this period where he's coming in like once every 2 weeks on like a Friday night, and he'd be like, this is the first hour off I've had from work. And he's like, but I only have 8 more years to retirement. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to make it to retirement.
Yeah.
Like 8 years, like how do you think you're going to make it 8 more years? Right. And I look at him and I'm like, the answer is, dude, you just need to, like, you literally need to say no at your job. Nope, not going to do it. Let somebody else sacrifice their entire being, their wellness, their family, their everything. Let them do it. And ideally, if everyone kind of had this mentality, nobody would do it, which means that that expectation and that bar would just kind of like come down, because it needs to come down. Like, people are just being worked literally to death for nothing. So I think some choices there are important with regards to work and just like how much you're willing to sacrifice. But then it's also like choices about how you spend the rest of your time. You know, I make no judgment about this, but I can count on, like, I'll say 2 hands how many hours of TV a year I watch. Yeah. It's just I don't make a judgment about it. I'm like, I'm better than that. It's just a choice. Like, I sit in front of the TV to watch something, and within 10 minutes I get bored and I get my laptop out and I pull up like AutoCAD and I'm like drawing something, and I forget to watch whatever it was I was watching. You know, like, it's choices you make, not in the active sense of like, I am going to choose to spend my time differently than watching TV. It's just, that's what I default to, you know? I spend a lot of time tunnel flying right now, and like that's a choice that I actively make to like go out there and treat it like a sport. Like, I'm training, you know, 2 to 4 times a week, and making that choice and sacrificing that time. And in fact, over the past few months, I'm sure you saw I had those foster dogs. I basically traded having those foster dogs for my own lifting and working out, because the only time of day that I really had to lift was the time of day that I ended up needing to go home and let them out. And that was just like, you know, that was a choice that I decided I was okay with. I could have also hired somebody to let them out during that period, and then I could have gotten my workouts in. But, you know, that's how I chose to shake it out, is like, I chose to take those foster dogs in instead of working out for a few months. And luckily, I've kind of likened fitness and training to a bank account, where the earlier you invest in it, the more you can kind of draw from it later on, and the less you have to put into it, because it sort of like compounds. So, you know, luckily I put on a lot of muscle in my 20s and gained a lot of strength, and I can take 3 months and not really lift, and basically going to look and perform the same. Yeah. You know, so, I mean, it really does ultimately come down to choices. Like, I'm not saying that the, you know, mom or dad with 4 kids and both working full-time jobs could just like suddenly make more choices to pick up some hobbies. Yep. But I think even, you know, in anyone's situation, there are choices that can be made. I don't think that I manage my time well at all. I don't necessarily think that I'm organized. I just really choose that when I do have time, I'm going to use it. Like, I'm like, right now, for example, I don't currently have an active membership at the shop where I do like metal and wood fabrication, because I was gone for, you know, like, I was basically gone for all of November in Italy on the motorcycle project. And then before that, I was prepping for it, so I was busy. So now I'm thinking about reactivating my membership, but it's kind of expensive. So I'm literally making a list of all the projects that I would like to get done. And then I'm looking at the calendar and going, okay, am I realistically going to be able to get in there enough days to finish these projects to make it worth it? You know, you could say that's being organized, but that's not, my days aren't like scheduled. I don't think I use my time efficiently. I think my Instagram screen time would give that away.
I think it's interesting though that, you know, the big thing is obviously for you to do all the shit you do, you just don't spend the time watching TV. And that's like the easiest one. You know, everybody, like, we all watch probably more TV. Most of us watch more TV than we probably care to admit and or choose to show the world. But like, that's an easy one. But like, it's so hard to just say like, I'm going to not come home and turn on Netflix because I'm tired of shit today. And I'm just going to zone out, because people wake up expecting to be motivated.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna like all of a sudden like I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow and I'm gonna go do fasted cardio and then I'm gonna eat chicken and vegetables and then I'm gonna go lift weights and then I'm gonna go be a performer at my job and then I'm gonna buy my spouse flowers and then I'm gonna take them on date night and then I'm gonna be the best dad ever and read books and like you ain't gonna wake up and think about all that shit in one day. Like
No.
that isn't gonna happen at all. For you, when you pick a hobby, is there like some sort of like are you searching for something else or like is there a way that you choose or is it purely like oh that sounds fun let's go try it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more whim and interest. And also, like, I don't want to lead anyone to think that, like, as soon as I'm interested in something, I just instantly go do it. Like, I wanted to learn how to weld for probably, let's say 15 years. I've probably wanted to weld since I was like 20-ish, right? If not before then. It took me until 4 years ago to learn that, because I didn't have the space or the time, facility, or part of it was I didn't know what I would do with the welding. Okay, great. You know how to weld. Well, what are you going to do with it, right? But when I first learned it, I actually had some projects in mind, some specific things that I wanted to build. So that gave me a focus for it. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I mean, it's usually just a whim. Like sometimes I see something and like 2 years ago, I got into sourdough bread baking, right? And that was a super whim thing too. I'd always kind of had this like slight curiosity, and it was over Christmas. My folks were in town and we were watching Michael Pollan's really good series on Netflix. The what is it? It's Cooked, but there's 4 episodes. I think it's like water, air.
At acid heat?
No, that's Samin Nosrat's. This is Michael Pollan's one that was like 2 or 3 years ago. It's called Cooked, but there were 4 or 5 episodes. Anyway, one of them was air, and it's essentially about sourdough bread. And I was like, man, I should start making sourdough bread. And that's it. Like I literally started a starter that same day, and like 10 or 15 days later, I baked my first loaf, and then I just like really kept practicing that. It took me about 9 months before I could make like good bread. And now 2 years later, I can make bread with very little attention to it. And it turns out awesome pretty much every time. Whereas before I had to like make sure I was like following every single step, but I put in enough time over 2 years that like the other day I had friends over for dinner and I started the bread early in the day, kind of forgot about it, remembered to fold it at one point. And then after dinner, we were like sitting around talking and I was like, oh yeah, I still got that bread in a proofer. And I went and I shook it a little bit and I was like, oh yeah, this will be good. And I like took the cutting board out real quick as we were talking after dinner. I just like folded and shaped this bread and threw it in the fridge. And you know, that's the kind of thing where I think a lot of people, if you were like, it's going to take you 2 years to learn this, they'd be like, no, I don't have 2 years to invest. But you know, it was 2 years of once a week on Saturday or Sunday, I would spend 4 hours, you know, not even 4 hours. I would spend an hour making dough and then folding it over the next course of 4 to 6 hours, whatever. So anyway, I guess my point is like, you can start something on a whim and it might take a long time for you to learn it, but that's okay. You've got a lifetime, right? Yeah. Hopefully.
Are you documenting stuff? Are you like, this is like, oh, I might be kind of interested in this. Like, do you keep a running list of shit you kind of want to get into and then pick and choose like life moments when it's available, or just, yeah, it's just on the whim?
Dude, my Instagram stories are as close as I get to like documenting. Like I do so many things that I'm like I'm done, and then I'm like, oh, I should have taken a picture of that, or I should have done a story of that. I do way more than you even would see from my Instagram, because half the time I just completely forget to post anything about it.
And that's what's fun, is like to know that like you're doing all this stuff, and it's even more fun now that you're just like, no, I want to go do that because I'm bored, or not bored, but like I have an interest in it.
I'm right? Curious. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the hard part, is getting someone to go, oh, I'm actually interested in learning how bread works, right? Because it's not, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever made bread. It's a very in-depth process in the beginning. Like you got to pay attention. Yeah. You got to work that thing. And it's something where like, you know, people used to spend all day making it, right? Like it does take love and effort when you're learning. But I think the craftsmanship, back to that point of like, I want to get better. I think that's a huge thing
of just wanting to go through the process. I remember when I was fly fishing, I was getting pissed because I dropped my fly like 4 times trying to tie the thing. And it's cold, it's Colorado, it's snowing. And I'm like getting pissed because my hands are cold and I'm fucking up. And I'm like, no, you signed up for this, right?
Yeah.
You can't be getting mad at tying flies while you're standing in a cold ass river. Like, that's what you signed up for by saying, I want to fly fish. So
that's the journey. Like, that is the thing. If you just wanted fish, you could go to the store. Right?
Right. And it's like, it's part of going through that. So I guess I would love to learn about, like, how do we help other people go through this, right? Like, I'm going through it now, and it's not because I didn't want to do it. It's because I thought I had to do the one thing, right? I was searching for my one thing. And now I'm like, no, I kind of like that I've got a ton of different experiences, because that's what's made my professional career, is that I just got a ton of experience in different shit. Like, this is job 15 for me, and I'm 33. And so how do you help your members at your gym? Like, when they're kind of like that member you're thinking of, like, what do you do to help them kind of like find new ways to look at hobbies or do things?
Well, I mean, we're very disconnected. We're very disconnected from a lot of things, because it's been abstracted away from us, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people don't realize that food comes from animals that live on farms, right? And like, I kind of say that sarcastically, but kind of not. Like, there are a lot of people who think of food as like something that exists like in a grocery store case, and they don't think about how it got there and where it came from, right? Like, you show them a picture of an animal being slaughtered and they're like, that's gross. I'm like, well, what did you have for dinner last night? But that same idea applies to something like furniture. Like, how did that piece of furniture come into existence? Yeah, if you bought it at IKEA, it was like stamped out on a massive machine. But if you go to your grandmother's house, she probably has a dresser that somebody like hand like hewed that lumber and like made that thing with their hands and, you know, placed it there on earth. So I guess my point is, see what you're curious about. Like, ask yourself, what are you innately curious about? Are you curious about food? Take a cooking class. Are you curious about like furniture or woodworking or carpentry? Take a class on that. One of the biggest, most underrated resources that people don't even know exists, and it's pretty much everywhere, is community education classes. You can go and get a catalog from your local, usually, I think it's usually like at a city level. They'll have the community ed classes, and they'll have entire catalogs of classes, everything from beekeeping to soap making to cooking to welding to working on your car. Like, and the classes are insanely cheap because it's all supported. I don't know exactly how it all works, but it's basically, it's supported by tax dollars, right? So like, if you're curious, thank you. If you're curious about, like, let's say working on your car, you're like, I don't want to be taken by the dealer anymore. I want to learn how to do some basic things. You can take a class on how to do basic auto maintenance. And I'm here to tell you, it ain't that fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like, it really isn't. Literally anyone can change their own oil. Should you? I don't know. It's like $40 to have somebody at Valvoline do it. But, you know, maybe you want to have that ability so that they also don't try to upsell you on a bunch of other things. Anyway, my point is, ask yourself what you're curious about and then just take a step in that direction. And then one of the best things would be community education classes. Like, they're super cheap. I've even suggested that to gym members who are interested in meeting people, like dating wise. I'm like, go take a community ed class or a class in general. Because what are you going to do? You're going to meet someone who's open-minded and like-minded in their interest of other things. Like, I've basically met every single person I've ever dated doing something I'm interested in. And then lo and behold, we share a common interest. So, you know, things tend to work out a little bit better than somebody you meet completely randomly. You have no like shared common foundational interest, and you're always like trying to find common ground. I'm sure that can work, but why not start from a premise of like, oh, I love cooking, so I've been taking cooking classes. Oh, me too. I met you at a cooking class. Cool. Now we cook together, right? The social aspect is huge. The other thing that's been popping up more and more over the past few years as a trend is these maker spaces. Like I was saying, like I have a membership at one here in Minneapolis and I had one in Philly. They're popping up more and more in big cities. They're basically like a maker gym. So they've got tons of equipment. You pay a monthly fee to use it. A lot of times they have classes to teach you how to use the machines. And that's another great place to meet people. And the social aspect is wonderful because even if you're not meeting people like in a dating sense, like you may meet people in a like a learning sense, like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, you're building chairs. Like, you know, I'm working on this cabinet. I've never done it before. Do you have any tips? Yeah, I've been a cabinet maker for 25 years. Let me show you how to do that better. Like, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said. And I don't think that that's a piece that people realize is such a value in their life, is the social aspect of hobbies. Like getting out of your work and like your friend zone of meeting people and like meeting people that challenge your perspective or embrace your perspective. Maybe you don't have a community that you get to hang out with people that think the way you do. Like work is not that and home is not that. And it's like, oh, I get to be with my people. Like, I think that's such a great element of hobbies that people aren't thinking of. And that's really like, when someone tells me they're a runner, like that just tells me why they like running. Like, unless they're like a professional marathoner or a triathlete, like, oh, you want to identify yourself as a runner? It's because there's a community of people that you run with that allows you to associate with something, right? That says, I am a runner, or I am a woodworker, or I am a dancer, I am a yoga person. But it wasn't the application, it was the experience and the people that you meet inside of that community.
Absolutely. And people are craving that. Like I see it all the time. I see it a lot, believe it or not, in skydiving. People will start skydiving and pretty quickly they'll quit skydiving, but they'll stay in the community because what they were looking for in the first place was like-minded freaks and weirdos. They didn't actually, it wasn't the skydiving they were looking for. Yeah. It was that community of people that are willing to kind of do something way outside the norm. Yeah. And it's always funny. It's like, you just started doing this sport and then you quit right away. Well, they got exactly what they were looking for. And that's okay too. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Do you ever, like, have you ever done or jumped into a hobby that just like scared the fuck out of you? Or like, you just like, it literally was such a dark zone, but you're like, let's go for it.
Honestly, skydiving was kind of a little bit like that for me. Like in the sense that I had always wanted to do it. I did it once when I was 18 years old. I did a tandem. And then I started when I was probably like 26-ish. And I was just like, I want to start. So I went out and I took the first course. And then as often happens on the day of the first course, you're supposed to make your first jump, but the weather was bad. So I had to drive all the way back out the next weekend, like thinking about it the whole way. And I was like, man, why am I doing this? Like, this is really stupid. I could die. Like, do I really need this? Like, what do I get out of this? And honestly, that feeling persisted for a while. Like every time I would drive out there, I'd be like, why am I doing this? This is so stupid. I'm spending money and time. I could be, doing something with my friends, but I'm driving out into the middle of nowhere to do this stupid sport. And the funny thing was though, I'd have that feeling. And then the first skydive of the day, I'd pull the parachute. And there's this moment where you go from like the crazy rushing, like you're falling at terminal velocity, the air's going by, you can't hear anything. You pull your parachute and, you get jerked up by it. All of a sudden, like it's kind of violent. And then it's like pretty much silent and calm. And now you're just like cutting through the air gently underneath the parachute. And that's the moment where, at least for me, I'd be like, fuck you, that was so awesome. Like, I need to do that again. And after a while, that feeling of like, why am I doing this kind of went away, because I would drive out there thinking like, man, I've gotten a lot out of this sport. Like, this has been really fun. Like, I'm glad that I spend my time this way. Yeah, I'm sacrificing something else I could be doing, but I really like enjoy this and appreciate it. But I did have that feeling in the beginning of like, why am I doing this? Like, this is scary. I was never like scared of it, I was never scared or fearful. I just recognized how stupid and dangerous it was.
Have you bungee jumped yet?
No, I never have. I've actually never had any interest in it.
That bridge, it's not the jump, because I've skydived in that rush. Like, I love it. Like, I did it at the base of Mount St. Helens, and he pulls the cord. It's this beautiful sunny day. You can see all three mountains, Adams, Jefferson, Hood. And he's like, welcome to my office. And I'm like, That's dope. That was awesome.
Good
But
line.
Bridgeport, bungee jumping, that first jump, yeah, it's a shitload, but it's the recoil from that band, and you're like, that bridge is coming really fast, and
Oh,
I am
yeah.
not slowing down. And then it's just like this bouncing that it's like, oh, but it's not violent at all. You would think you're violent, but it's like you're chest strapped, hip strapped, and ankle strapped. And it was just like, oh, but it was a rush. That was like, wow.
I would totally do
I'm not
it.
sure
I haven't. Yeah, no, I would totally do it. I haven't been to many places where it's actually been like New Zealand was the only place that it was possible, and we actually went paragliding instead, which was super cool. That's actually something I will probably get into in the next year or so. I'm very lucky. My folks bought a place in Italy in the town that I was born in, and so now I kind of have a place to go. And it just so happens it's one of the best places in Italy to learn how to paraglide. So I'm probably going to pick a week sometime next year and sign up for the course and go over and do that in Italy, because I'm super interested in it. I love flying my parachute as it is. The idea of just running off the side of a mountain and flying for an hour sounds pretty awesome.
On the countryside of Italy.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
on top of that. No, it's something where it's like, and I love that you just said that. You're like, I really want to get into this, right? I'm looking forward to that. And I think that's where people really can get to, where it's like you get in this catalyst of like, oh, I want to try that. And being okay with like, nah, that wasn't for me. Let me try this. And you're going to have some things that really stick that you're like, it feeds my soul to do that. And then you have some things that are like, it was fun. I'm glad I did it. And occasionally I'll go do it with people, but I don't need to do it. As we're just kind of looking at this kind of concept of all the different things, can you just list out the different hobbies that you have? Because they're so freaking many, or as many that you can kind of think of. Because I want people to know like the expansiveness of like how you just want to spend your time living your life.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I can do that. So let's say like food and cooking. I'll say baking bread as a separate thing from that, because it really is kind of its own entity. Motorcycles, both riding them. Okay, so motorcycles, I like riding them fast and aggressively. I like touring on motorcycles. Last summer we went to Romania and rode 50cc mini motorcycles cross country in Romania. I also like working on them and like restoring and building motorcycles. So there's a bunch of aspects there. I'm pretty into cars. I have an old 68 Corvette that I restored from like ground up, like bare bones shell to pretty nice little car now. So I like working on driving that. I'm very much a casual hunter. I almost don't even want to call myself a hunter, because I don't really spend that much of the year hunting. Like I don't really, I don't go out scouting. I'm the guy who goes on a couple hunting trips a year, just shows up, does a hunt and leaves. But it is something that interests me. Actually, within kind of that, along those lines, like barbecuing, it's a little bit different than cooking. Like I've got a big green egg, and I've been into smoking and barbecuing for a long time, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. Woodworking and carpentry is an interest of mine. I've built a few pieces of different stuff here and there. I built a really cool shelving unit back when I lived in Philly, a Murphy bed. That was really cool, that like folded up into the wall. Metal fabrication, that's something mostly been, I think of what all I've done. Mostly it's been furniture. When I moved into my current place in St. Paul, Minnesota, I built a bed from scratch. That was really cool. Partly because I couldn't find a bed that fulfilled the specific like space need that I like utilization that I wanted, and partly because I just wanted to build a bed. I just found last night on Craigslist this big slab of marble, and I'm going to fabricate I've got this spot next to my bed that is sort of useless, but it's got a lot of light. So I'm going to build a plant stand, and I have an idea for a nice little table with a marble top on it. I think that'll be really cool. Tech stuff has always been a big hobby of mine. Like I'm a pretty savvy tech guy. Like I do all my own, like when I launched the olive oil import business, it started with people sending me a message on Instagram being like, hey, I'd like a bottle. And then I was like, oh man, I should really create a spreadsheet for this. And so then it was a spreadsheet, and then it was a web page with a form that inserted rows into the spreadsheet automatically. And then I modified that to be like a little bit more in depth, and it sent the data directly to a shipping service so that I could print out labels easily. And now it's like processes credit cards, handles subscriptions, because that's something I just launched. A lot of people ask me for a subscription service. So like, I don't want to have to order this oil. Just send it to me 4 times a year. So I've done all the tech on that. That's always been a big hobby of mine. Let's see. I'm honestly, the crazy thing is I'm probably forgetting things like lifting, powerlifting, strongman has always been, a big passion. Kind of, we talked a little bit, I think, before we started recording, like at this point, strength and fitness is just a means to an end for me. Like I still want to look really good naked, and I want to be strong and capable enough to do everything I want to do. But like everything I want to do right now, I have the ability to. Like last year, about a month ago, last year in October, we went armed hiking in Colorado. And I say armed hiking because we didn't see a single elk the entire time. But it was like no joke, 40, 50 pound pack, like hiking up mountains at 10,000 feet. And like I had plenty of capability for that.
Nice.
So that's always been a thing. One thing that I've never gotten into in the way that I like wish I would is photography. My dad has always been a photographer, and it's just his passion. My mom and dad travel a lot, and that pairs really well because, they travel and then he takes a lot of photos. I've just never really gotten into it, partly because, and this is a bad excuse, but I think I don't really have an eye for it. But the truth is I've never dedicated the time to it. I've had the equipment and I haven't used it. Yeah. So, that's okay. I just haven't pursued it as much as I would like to, but my actions say that I'm actually not that interested in it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, dude. There's probably other ones. I was trying to think of things earlier that I've started and then been like, yeah, I actually don't actually enjoy this. Like home brewing beer was another one.
Oh.
The process was kind of cool, but then I realized I don't even like drinking beer that much. So I'd end up with all this beer, and I was like, all right, I don't actually like this process enough to create a bunch of beer that I don't actually want. Yeah. So that was one that kind of fell by the wayside. I had tons of equipment. Of course, I bought every gadget you could possibly have. And then I was like, I don't need to do this anymore. And I sold it all. So, yeah, I mean, I'll probably leave it there, but it's pretty wide breadth of hobbies, I guess.
But they're not always 100% full throttle all the time. Sometimes they're heavy in one and not heavy in another. Like they undulate.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Partly because of like just realities of where I live and seasons and stuff, right? Like I can't realistically skydive in Minnesota in the winter. So
that's your attitude. You can't.
Dude. And that's the funny thing is you can skydive here. It's just really, really cold and miserable. So, I might go on 1 trip or 2 trips a winter where I go down south and jump, but mostly I just do tunnel flying. And that's been something I've been doing a lot of over the past year. I've been really, really hitting it hard. I kind of have what I see as a unique opportunity in that a good buddy of mine, moved back here to be the lead instructor, and he's one of the best in the world. So I'm kind of taking advantage of this time to work with a coach that is, hyper elite. And I figure rather than stretching out what I could maybe do in 3 years, if I just hit it really hard, I can accomplish that in 1 year and have it in the bank, and then not have to do it later, and maybe not have the opportunity to do it later. So sometimes you have to recognize in your life, I think, when the stars align and you can take advantage of something. Like if you have a really great teacher who's willing to teach you, take advantage of it. Yeah. 'Cause it's not always there.
Yeah. I think the timing of a thing is huge too, to understand, like, does it fit in with your life? Like, it may not be a thing that you can do right now with 3 kids at home, but it could totally be something as a gift to yourself when you retire.
Yep.
But the lack of trying or even installing this kind of lifestyle in your 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's not going to magically happen when you're 60 and retired. Like you're going to have a lifestyle built around not doing shit.
No, and I think you have to be really careful in balancing that, because you may not get to retirement. Like one of my dearest friends, it was one of the blessings of moving back to Minnesota at a really tough time is she was diagnosed with cancer and given 7 months to live, you know, and she's, hopefully she never hears this. I want to say she's 54. So, you know, like within striking distance of retirement, and they gave her 7 months to live. Now, granted, it's been 20 months, but that's all extra and bonus. So if she had waited until, oh, I'll do that in retirement, you know, like she might not have ever had the opportunity to do those things. And it really has been a blessing for her in the sense that it's kicked her into gear. Like they've been to Italy 2 or 3 times now. Nice. And before she was diagnosed, she had gone once, you know, it's like, but now it's a priority because you never know. So there's a balance. Obviously, if you've got little rugrats running around at home and you're working full-time jobs and everything, like, you know, maybe you don't have a lot of time for it, but do you have an hour a night that you could dedicate? You can do a lot with an hour if you focus on it. You know, you can go in the garage and you know, build one small piece of that piece of furniture or whatever. There's probably some time to be found in there.
Absolutely. And I think just finding it within yourself to say, like, this is important to me. I want to try that. You know, like it's been something like last year I traveled a lot, and I remember being in this hotel in Indianapolis, and I had this older person serving me breakfast, and she just didn't look happy. And I don't want to put words in her mouth or assume anything, but I was like, thank goodness that I have a profession that I really love, that I probably won't be in a situation where I'm serving breakfast at a Marriott, and nothing wrong with it. But like, that probably isn't the life she dreamt of as a 20-year-old. Like, I want to be doing this, and maybe it is, but I just want people to find.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. It's unfortunate, right? Like, I mean, it sounds to me like she might have even been at an age where she shouldn't even have to work anymore.
Right.
But we've built a social system where you're expected to work until you die, basically. Like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah. And I just, you know, I'm on this mission where it's like, man, I don't really want to wake up and find myself having regrets that I didn't try something. Like, if I really want to try fly fishing, like, what's stopping me? Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing stopping me from doing it. Like, what am I sacrificing? An hour less of Instagram and mindless social media scrolling? 1 more hour of a stupid series? Like, we have the time. Right?
Or 1 more hour of taking on a project at work that you know full well you don't have the bandwidth for, but like the expectation is there for you to take it on. Like, do you think anybody who's dying and spending their last days is like, man, I really, really regret not taking on that, you know, extra project that might have gotten me a promotion? Like, fuck that. Like,
right.
The job scam, especially in this country, and the mentality that's been developing over the past, and it's recent. It's only over the past like 30 years or so, man, maybe 40. I think things really started to crumble in the 80s. The mentality is almost an illness. Like, companies today have zero loyalty to their employees. Like, yeah, I'm speaking in generalities. There are probably some really great companies out there, but by and large, they will fire your ass at the drop of a spreadsheet. Some MBA comes in and runs an analysis that says that they can save 1% by canning you, you're gone.
Yep.
Right? And but employees seem to have this general attitude of like undying loyalty, you know, like, oh, I could never say no to another thing, or I could never just not do that. I've told people before, what if you just didn't do it? What would happen?
Right.
Would you get fired? Well, no. Well, I don't know. Maybe my performance review would be bad. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
I think we need like a major consciousness shift in this country, a much more willingness to be like, nah, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not sacrificing my life and health and wellness and family. Like, people definitely regret not spending more time with their family.
Totally.
But not the job stuff.
It's a badge of honor these days to martyr yourself to the point where it's like, oh, I worked more hours than you.
Yeah.
And it's like, you weren't more productive because you spent more hours there. In fact, you were probably less productive because you spent more hours doing it and not doing other things that gave you other gifts in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're efficient at running the gym Because in order to go do all the shit you want to do, like, you don't need to be sitting and running spreadsheets for the gym. The gym runs. And then you get to go like, hey guys, you're doing great. Do you need anything from me? Great. I'm going to go do this stuff now.
Right. And here's the thing. I make a lot less money than I would if I spent a lot more time there, because I pay more people to be there so that I don't have to be. But that's the choice I make. If I wanted to make as much money as possible, I would just work my ass off and be there all hours of the day. But I'm trying to find the balance where I can pursue the most interesting things and essentially work the least I possibly can. Or, you know, like the olive oil thing, that's so much fun to do right now that I don't even consider it work.
Mm-hmm.
You know? When it becomes a chore, God willing, I sell enough that it becomes a chore to start packing and shipping all of them, then I'll hire someone to do that so that I can do other interesting things. You know, like, I'd rather be the one who goes over to Italy and does what I do, finding unique, cool things to share with people, than being packing and shipping boxes so that I can, you know, make more money on the bottom line. Who gives a shit? You can't take it with you to your grave.
Yeah.
And hopefully Bernie Sanders will win and there'll be a massive wealth tax and the rich people won't be able to keep their money anyway.
But being
you could edit that out if you want.
Go in and have this like beginner's mindset and willing to try new shit and go in and like, let me learn, let me get better, let me try something is a mindset thing. There's something willing to like go in where, because it's a lot of mental bandwidth to try new shit.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that. But I think the way that, especially the way I like you're saying it, is like, chase the things that you're just interested in. Start with that. Are you interested? Like, do you even have that glimmer? Like right now I'm kind of searching for a hobby that makes me do this, like a real focus thing, because I'm not that type of person. And my dad was just like, oh, you're into fly fishing, you shouldn't tie ties. And or flies. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's the thing. I think it's going to be cooking, because I like to cook and I have a lot of kitchen shit for, I'm sure you and I
like to eat.
Like to eat, right? Like I own more kitchen shit than a single 33-year-old straight dude should own, right?
Sure.
At this juncture in my life, but I love it. So it's like, oh, maybe that's my thing where like, I just go really deep down a recipe. That's like some technique stuff. And like, that's my like, I go deep here. But it's like, try it. You don't know. And like, I've been trying to be better. Like I just did HelloFresh for a minute just to see what it was like to have different recipes. And like, will you make time to cook more often than doing meal prep style cooking, like, which is what I do. And it was like, hey, you won't do it 4 times a week, but you do it once a week, right?
Sure.
Okay, let's start with that.
Yep.
Right? And it was just my way of like kind of chunking through and like, will this work for my life? It doesn't need to happen tomorrow. It doesn't need to happen right now. I'm not going to be perfect at it, right? And the thing about cooking is like, guess what? If it tastes like shit, hot sauce is only a dip away. And like, you've all eaten worse food. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's something fucked up at home.
Yep.
So,
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, I think sometimes people have a fear with cooking that it's going to like turn out so bad. I'm like, I mean, usually it's just not that great versus bad. It's pretty hard to make something bad. It can happen. One time, oh man, I think somebody, I don't remember who it was, used like 4 times the fish sauce that was called for in the recipe in like some coconut curry. That was maybe as bad as you could do. Like, a little bit of fish sauce gives some good flavor. A lot of bit of fish sauce ruins it.
I'm curious, what does your Instagram and your YouTube and your Craigslist feed look like? Your Google and YouTube feed must just be this like endless, because we have a stream of like, you want to do something, I need to fix this piece on this rare motorcycle. There's a fucking video on it. Someone's already done it.
YouTube, and actually it's funny that we haven't touched on that yet because it's a good topic. YouTube is an incredible resource. Like, you can basically learn how to do anything on YouTube today. Like, I've learned how to French braid hair, weld, repair all kinds of appliances. I have several rental properties, and anytime something breaks in it, I just Google the model number and the issue, and inevitably there's a YouTube video of some guy named Gary like explaining exactly step by step how to fix it. Like, to the point where I've just sent my tenants a video before. If it's something that simple, I can be like, here, it'll take us less time if I just send you this than if I come all the way there, and you'll get it fixed faster. YouTube is an incredible resource. So I'm just to give you an idea of my YouTube history.
Yeah.
So my most recent one is the Harlem Globetrotters doing like a slam dunk from a skydiving thing. The next series are 360, which is like a CAD software tutorial videos. The next one's a tunnel flying tutorial video. The next one is one of my feats of strength. I did a 203-pound kettlebell goblet squat several years ago, and I was showing somebody that. Scrolling back, how to adjust the mechanical governor on a small engine. That was for the snowblower that I bought and sold recently. Yeah, so that's my YouTube history. Like my buddy Stoney, Oddball Stoney, he got this massive cab from like a military truck, and he's gonna build his own vehicle out of it. So he just did a video about a week ago of like what he's gonna do with it. Stoney is actually really cool. If you watch this video of his, I'll send you the link later. He's talking about what he's gonna do with this truck. And he's got a particular way of talking through things that I really dig, because it's kind of the similar thought process to me. And I think the reason I like it so much is Stoney and I were in Romania together on this mini motorcycle thing. And one of the bikes, mine, broke down. And it broke down in a way that was essentially, for all intents and purposes, unrepairable in the country. Like the part didn't exist, and there wasn't a repair it. So Sonny and I are similar in this kind of like mad scientist way. And we were having this conversation, like talking through the possibilities. And he's like, well, I could do it this way, but then I was thinking maybe I would do it that way. And it's really cool to watch this video of his, because I can hear him going through that exact same thought process. We actually ended up getting the bike repaired. It was like probably one of the coolest feats of MacGyvering that I will ever accomplish. Fixing this unrepairable part in this tiny little town in Romania. I was like in some dude's kitchen using a soldering iron because the innkeeper found this guy that would have a soldering iron. And I'm like in his kitchen using this really shitty soldering iron to fix this part. I mean, it was epic. But Stoney's cool. He builds like custom cars and stuff like that. And he goes through that same kind of thought process of like, how can I approach this? Like, maybe I'll do that, but well, then the engine's got to go here. Anyway, it's really cool.
Yeah. No, I think this is so much fun, because to look at, and I think that's a great place for everybody, if you're watching this to start, is to, what are the things that you're just kind of interested in life? Like, do you have a general interest in kind of cooking? You don't have to know anything about cooking. You don't have to have tried it. It's just something where you're like, yeah, I'd be kind of interested in learning. Great. Put that off to the side. Oh, if it's woodworking, do that. And like kind of compile things, and then look at, like Dave is saying, and like, what does my time have time for? What does my life have time for? And what's easy for me to install? And what's something that I aspire to install and that I can work towards getting my life to facilitate? Because as he said, man, life is life. You can't change it sometimes, but we can start making moves to facilitate those opportunities. And don't expect yourself to be the person that grabs the laptop because you're bored watching Glee for the 15th time with your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever, and that you pull a laptop up and you start researching shit. Like, I'm not necessarily that person either. I've become that more as I've gotten into different things. But just start easy. Start looking at shit that you like, and then start trying it. Find, is there a free solution or a cheap solution in town that you can do a low barrier, simple solution? Or maybe you're the type that like wants to go all in. Like, I'm an all in type. Like, it sounds like Dave is as well. And I'm like, I need to get back into having plants around my house because it makes things look nice. And so then I went and got like a bunch of plants, because it's like, if it's just one, I'll kill it. Right? But if it's
yeah, that's awesome. I did the same thing the other day. I got like 8 plants from my bedroom because I decided I just wanted to have a bunch of greens in there.
Yeah. And God, does it not change your room exponentially?
Dude, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Oh, one of my headphones just ejected itself out of my ear. But yeah, no, it definitely makes the environment just so much nicer.
Yeah. And then to learn, like, hey, maybe you just start off by like, hey, what plants are good for my environment? Because thankfully both my parents are master gardeners, so they're very like agriculturally intelligent, and they were down for Thanksgiving, and it was something that we could all do together as a shared experience.
Yeah.
But for them, it was like, nope, this tree needs to be watered like 4 times a week. And I'm like, nope, that's not for me. Like, I need the one that, like, if I forgot about it for a week because I'm traveling, it will still be alive and I know I could save it. Right? But like, start with just researching and going down the rabbit hole. Like, okay, I live in Arizona. Plants that grow here are probably different than what grow in Oregon or Philadelphia or Minnesota. Right? Like, and just go with that and then see where it leads you.
And then you brought up a great point too, like with your parents, like people are eager to share the knowledge and information they have. Like ask people. If you're interested in gardening, go to a small garden center and ask. There are people out there that are just a wealth of knowledge and they're eager to share it. You want to get into fabrication? You know, you might find a grumpy welder who doesn't have any time for anybody, or you might find a guy who's eager to share. You know, that's another thing that we've kind of lost. Like apprenticeships are almost non-existent. And that used to be how that kind of knowledge was passed down, because it's not the kind of knowledge that a lot of times, I could go down a whole rabbit hole with this, but it's not the kind of knowledge that lends itself well to being written down and transferred in that way. It really has to be transferred by hand. Like, you know, like you have to be doing it. Like you can read about welding all you want, but you don't actually understand what it's like to control a molten pool of metal until you get your hands on it and do it. And then you start to realize all the little variables, like thickness of the metal, if there's a breeze through the shop, how that affects it. Like everything affects it. And there's no way to learn that other than being hands-on. But like your point about using your parents as a resource, like there are so many people out there that are resources. Just ask. You don't have to do so much research. If you just say, hey, what are the best plants for in my house when I only have a little bit of light? Boom, they'll just tell you.
Yeah. And what a great way to, as we talked about community, right? To get to know someone else and to connect and maybe find an outlet. Because maybe that hobby is, you're not craving an activity to go do. You're craving interaction with someone else that has a shared interest with you. That's not your day-to-day routine. And so maybe that's what making bread with Dave on Saturdays become. It's not about eating a loaf of sourdough bread, although that's fun. It becomes like, oh, I get 4 hours to myself and I get to go do something that I chose to go do with my time, as opposed to only doing things that my time is mandated that I do, or time that I've chosen to mandate because of the lifestyle I've chosen to live. So, man, it was so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Spot on.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us and learning all about hobbies and the cool shit that you've done and sharing some great knowledge with people just of how to get started. Because that's the framing and why I really wanted you to be this person, is because that's the hardest part, is getting started and saying like, let me just go try that. Who cares if you suck? Who cares if you don't like it? Who cares if you don't do it forever, right? Just start, because that thing might be the catalyst that opens up the door to something else, right? Like, fitness wasn't the thing that I really particularly set out to be in my career, but it became the catalyst that opened up the door of baseball, which is something that I really wanted to do. So like, wow, okay, getting into powerlifting and Olympic lifting and strongman, like I don't do it anymore, but I'm so thankful I did at the time because it was such a gift to me. So maybe woodworking is that for you. Maybe it's making wine. Maybe it's making beer. Maybe it's playing cornhole. Maybe whatever it is, do something for you. So man, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate you. Guys, go check out Dave, follow his adventures, and be motivated to go do more shit in your life. And just realize like, hey, there's a whole world out there of interests and things that fulfill your own life and fulfill your heart that can be just as fulfilling for your health and your fitness as going and doing some deadlifts and eating a piece of celery.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah, good, man. Thank you. I really appreciate just getting to sit down and chat with you anytime, man.